Good morning. And just wanted to start by thanking Joan for inviting us again to speak about what is an affordability crisis, and even the fact that people are now using the word affordability as opposed to what John referenced last night about being expensive. It takes the emotion, particularly for someone like me who works in delivery, it takes the emotion out of the conversation when you talk about the fact that it's not just track renewals that it's not affordable. Kind of at the moment, everything is not affordable. So what Eric and I are going to cover today is we're going to go through some of the tactical things that we're doing, which kind of wasn't really where we thought we were going to go with the community of practice, but that's where we've ended up. Because track renewals since devolution, it hasn't quite lost its way, but because we devolved, we've gone our own way. So each of the routes and regions have gone their own way, and you'll see through some of the stuff we're going to present through the next 25 minutes that we need to do something. We need to break down the silos, we need to leave our egos at the door, and we all need to help each other, because I'm looking around the room now and there's lots of people I interface with, and we've all got a part to play, and it's a joint effort. It's not just about pointing the finger at renewals people who do the renewals and thinking that all the problem lies at their door. So hopefully the next 25 minutes will give you a flavour of what we're doing. Eric, before we go into the detail, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think it taps really nicely into the theme of today. I think some of the point that Charisma made at the start about collaboration and even in terms of asset management, some of what we're doing is very, very close to what we're doing within the community of practice. So that's it's fully aligned by design. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Right, so we're going to run through some detail now for the next 25 minutes. And yeah, why do we need it? I've already said that we've kind of gone our own way. And what is it? I mean, you can do any Google search and it'll tell you something. That was the one I liked. Because we just need to get together and we need to sort this crisis out. We might not necessarily solve it, but we can at least get to a point where we've done our best. Because we've got another control period to prepare for now, which is only 3.5 years away. We need to sort this before that control period starts and before some people decide how much they think track renewals should cost in CP8. We need to be able to inform that. So all of that stuff, I'm not going to read through the detail in there. I've already said we need to remove silos. We need to kind of leave those egos at the door. But we do need people to engage, because we've got people who've kind of held their hand up and said, yeah, we will engage with you, Brian. We will engage with you, Eric. And we've not seen them since. But we absolutely need their support in this because we can't do it on our own. Massive economies of scale through what we're trying to achieve, and some of that will come through the detail. And we've got to enable change. And this is the great thing about having Eric from the TA involved with us. We've got to enable some of that change, and Eric will talk about some of that later on. And as I said, we're preparing for CP8. We've got to prepare really well for CP8 and not set ourselves up to fail before we even start. So who's in it? I mean, this is quite an animated diagram. There's lots of people in the community of practice. As I said, all volunteered to be in it, but I do need to see more from some of them, because it's kind of getting there, but it's not quite there, and it's not perfect, but we will get there. So Eric and Amit have done a really good job in the background in setting up a steering group, setting up some terms of reference. We've got sub-working groups working on some of the detailed projects, which Amit is here today, and you can talk to him about some of those. We've had a couple of conversations already with TfL and with TFW, because it's clear that some of the stuff that we're doing, absolutely, they're probably doing it as well. So we've had some conversations there. And Eric, do you want to talk about some of the governance?
Yeah, so we do have a bit of process around it. We've started to develop projects on a page to actually make sure that we've got some firm deliverables and some milestones to achieve. And we'll go into a little bit of detail into some of the work streams later on in the package. But it's not without some structure, getting some terms of reference agreed with the stakeholders. So that took some time, made sure that we were at least aligned around the objectives that we wanted to cover, and we've got a bit of project management discipline to make sure that we're held to account every time we meet.
Yeah, so quite a lot of people have said to us, well, yeah, but track renewals, you're already a community. You already know each other. You're almost related, all of you. But it's quite informal. So yeah, we talk to each other a lot, and we were meeting up once every couple of periods. But there was kind of no real structure to that. So what we're trying to do is drive that structure. So what are we focusing on? Right, there's lots. And as I said at the start, we didn't necessarily think it was going to be so tactical, but we recognise that it needs to be dealing with some of the tactical stuff collectively, such that we sort it once. And even just this morning, Leventi was talking to me about something this morning. I said, right, we will take that on as the community of practice now, because it's really important that we drive that consistency and we fix it once, and not like this one. So this was the first problem we picked up. So there was we did have a notice from the ORR, an improvement notice, and the improvement notice was suggesting that you can only do 4 welds per welding team per shift, and you have to have a 20-metre exclusion zone around welders. Now, think of a big S&C renewal on that Sunday afternoon when you've got signalling people, you've got welders, you've got track people, you've got everybody crawling all over that site. Think about trying to have an exclusion zone of 20 metres around those welders, and think about the welders only being allowed to do 4 welds per shift. And then think about what that does to the affordability crisis if we were having to stick to the requirements. So we took this on as a community. Now, it wasn't perfect from the start, but we got there to a point where we know now what we think we need to do next. So it's been a really good piece of work. The CRSA have actually kind of brought it together, but certainly Scotland Alliance, Southern Alliance, and the guys through the SRE have been involved to a point where we will present something back to the ORR and Network Rail together. And we won't be presenting it in our silos, because if we did, we'd have to do it 4, 5, 6 or 7 times. We've saved a lot of time and effort in doing this, saved some money, not massive amounts of money, but we've saved some money. We are going to do that collective response, and we are looking at things that probably needed to be looked at collectively anyway. And we've done it together, and we will overcome that issue of 4 welds per shift. Because I can see a couple of my customers in the room here, and if I went back to them and said, I need more money now because I can only do 4 welds per shift, then I'd have more of a cost, an affordability crisis to have to deal with. So this was a really good example, a really good one to pick up together, actually. But it's just one example now of what we need to do, and the one that I spoke to Leventi about this morning is one we will definitely be picking up and doing together. So we've still got a bit to do. We've got to get full endorsement of what we believe is the right approach. It's been a really good job of reviewing just the basic information that's out there and comparing notes with Scotland, with Central, with Southern. We need to do the same with high output. We need to do the same eventually, and I did speak to colleagues from TFW about this a few months ago. We will share our work with TFW and TfL, and then it's kind of up to you whether you do anything with it. But it's really, really important that we do share it. Because ultimately we're all working for the same boss at the minute, ultimately with TFW, TfL and us in Network Rail, and others. But it's not limiting it to those big suppliers either. There are smaller suppliers, some of which are represented here today. Some of those smaller suppliers need to understand what we're doing, such that they can just copy it with pride. And the last point on that slide, if I tell you in Network Rail, if you didn't already know, it's less than 100%, but it's not much less than 100% of our welds still rely on 2 human beings to do that work. It's not good enough. We're behind the rest of the world with that. We've got to work on that, and I want to cover that in one of the later slides. Right, so Eric is now going to talk about some strategy in renewals.
Yep. So as Brian kind of mentioned, when we set up the community practice, we thought we'd be dealing at kind of that strategic level, but actually what we found was that there were actually tactical present issues that we had to deal with right now. And this part of the subject area focuses on 2 parts, the things that we need to do now and the things that we need to do to develop our future plans for what we need to do to deliver track renewals in the future. What pieces of plant and equipment do we need going forward? In the more tactical box, actually, what we saw was, as we went around the regions, a erosion of some of the volumes for key bits of plant and equipment. And sometimes that's because of different working methodology, or actually it's just something that wasn't used here, that people have traditionally grown up using different bits of kit. And actually some of the pieces of equipment, I think on the next slide, were at risk of becoming endangered species, that if we didn't gather our collective view on things, that we would somehow lose some of these bits of kit within our arsenal of tools to deliver. And a good example of this was around the use of tilting wagons. And through nobody's fault, you know, the issues with modular barriers, modular S&C, actually started to show individual projects that road delivery was becoming cheaper. And all that did was drive the unit rate costs of rail delivery, but of modular S&C, higher and higher. So you get into a kind of a tailspin of increasing cost because of reducing volume. So working collaboratively with the community of practice and with SEO and with our delivery partners, start to change the model by which we price road and rail delivery to try and incentivize the right thing to do, to make sure that we're not sat there with a fleet of tilting wagons that are sat there doing nothing. You know, from a carbon, from a cost perspective, make it the best whole life cost solution. So there's very tactical things there. As I say, we've got Kirov cranes, tilting wagons, MFS, PEMLEMs, a few things that if we don't get our collective volumes together and get our methodologies aligned, then we will start to lose some of these from our toolkit. Moving on to the more strategic element, the question around what do we need in terms of plant going forward. There's a big piece of work within the community practice, working with colleagues on Eastern, working with colleagues within route services, working with the modelling team to gather the data that would allow us, from a very asset management perspective, identify the asset age, the asset condition profile, the asset type, and start to build that kind of strategic plan that will help us decide whether or not train-based systems are the right way to go, or whether or not we continue with traditional style renewal. The work is in its early stages, but the modelling and the data, I think, is a step change beyond where we've ever been before. And we hope to start to produce some recommendations and options early in 2026. So that gives you an essence of both the tactical stuff we're dealing with, but also looking ahead to what do renewals require in terms of plant and equipment going forward.
Okay, so the next one is a little bit of a hobby horse of mine. And it's probably, out of all the things we will end up dealing with, it's the most sensitive subject. I mentioned already about changing the language about being expensive and not being affordable. We need a little bit of support. I've worked nationally. I've recently worked in Wales and Western. I now work in North West and Central. And I know, even though people will tell you otherwise, I know that there is some inconsistency in the way that people report volume. Whether their stress in overlaps are reported, whether the internal ramps are reported as volume, whether the internal ramps, external ramps, Cat 14 with sand blanket replacement. Some routes decide to call that Cat 14, some routes decide to call that Cat 11. Leventi and I have had that chat a couple of times. It's inconsistent, so there's no wrong and right answer to some of this, but it must be consistent, because what's happening is that is my favourite slide for lots of reasons, because it doesn't mean anything. The reason it doesn't mean anything is because all it's doing is comparing the delivery cost. It doesn't look at your how much does your track access cost? And I've said this every year in this conference for the last 3 years. It doesn't look at the Schedule 4 cost. So we're working, Group Finance are actually in our community of practice, and they're getting it now, that it needs to be more mature. And I'm going to talk you through that, and then I'm going to talk you through something else, which is about the same job. Rather than have that slide that was up previously, that only compares the delivery cost and nothing outside of that, if it was more mature, and you looked at that job, and let's say this job is on the West Coast South. This West Coast South job, we are normally being asked to deliver in 100-metre sprints. So every week, go in there for 12 hours. I don't like doing it from an engineering perspective, but I'm asked to go and do it. So we do 150 metres of renewal a week. The Schedule 4 costs nothing, next to nothing. The Schedule 8, we're handing it back at a decent speed, costs next to nothing. But the unit rate of my job, the reason why that's scoring very low is the unit rate, because it's costing me more mobilisations to deliver that job. I'm only compared on the unit rate. Nobody's interested in my comparison when I look at Schedule 4 and Schedule 8. So if I show you the same job now, if I dig my heels in, which I've had to do in Wales and Western over the last few years, dig my heels in to a point where, actually, I'm telling you now, I want to do all my jobs in one stage. Stop telling me to engineer a job in multiple stages. If I'm allowed to do it in one stage, what's going to happen? My unit rate is going to be the best unit rate in the country, and the 4.3-mile job we did with you, Andy, in Severn Tunnel, in one go, 4.3-mile renewal. Just because I dug my heels in a bit, we did a job at 4.3 miles. You can imagine what that did to my unit rate, but obviously the Schedule 4 cost was increased. But it was the right industry decision for that one. But if you look at that job on the West Coast, and I was allowed to do it like that, it's going to cost me millions in Schedule 4. Yet, I'm trying to convince my group finance colleagues that this is the more mature discussion to be having. And I've already talked about this. There are massive inconsistencies, and I can see Harry and Lee in the room here. We've got to deal with these inconsistencies. Even in North West and Central, I've got three routes who measure things slightly different. So then you're making comparisons in one region, and then what do you think happens when I go into my colleagues? So, as I said, this is one of the most sensitive subjects, but we have got a national team already looking at, let's just drive some consistency, let's change the cost and volume handbook, and let's do things the same. And then even if you did then use the finance graphs, at least I'd know they were that apples with apples comparison and not this apples with chairs comparison that I've talked about before. Eric?
I think I'm going to sound like a stuck record, but even in terms of innovation, there's two elements to it that we find ourselves dealing with. I guess the more tactical issues and also the sort of the bigger ticket items within this subject area. In the more tactical things, working with the community practice, again, across the UK-wide, we identified opportunities for standard change. And this was born out by one region that pushed for higher speed handbacks using a proprietary clamping system. So that was done under a localised temporary variation, but being able to spot that opportunity and then scale it by making that temporary variation a national one then facilitates that 60-mile-an-hour handback speed across the UK. And for my sins, with that excellent job title that I have, I look after TRK 2102. I see a few others that are involved within working groups, but TRK 212, track design standard, we can pick up these things much quicker. I keep an open remit for that standard such that we can update it every year and start to make the changes and embed those changes within the standard much quicker. And actually it gives me an element of air cover every time when I sit with signalling colleagues or overhead line colleagues, because I can say, well, I've got an open standard, I can make those changes and we can facilitate what the industry tells us we need from that standard challenge process. So a good example, temporary clamps, everyone now able to run at higher speeds using proprietary clamping systems. And you know what, having opened up that bit of the standard just for one thing, actually then opened up another question about, well, could we then start to alter the inspection frequencies? Could we then actually go for higher speeds? So one question leads to another and actually pushes us as the standard owner to consider new things. As someone said to me, there aren't many kind of silver bullet solutions out there that are going to fix all the ills of how we deliver track renewals. But there are some larger ticket items out there that give us a benefit. And as we went round the regions looking at their various efficiency plans, we saw that there was some really good practice and really good things being developed in one area that just didn't have any air cover anywhere else. And one good example is the digital speedboard initiative And I'll not steal any of Amit's thunder because he is sat over there somewhere. So go and have a chat with Amit and really do ask him about that initiative and what it could potentially drive in terms of benefit for not just the renewals community, but also within track maintenance. So, a bigger, larger piece of work with a bit of capital investment, but actually could drive efficiency and benefit. Another example that I see coming forward is actually in the world of data and the world of Insight, the Insight tool within Network Rail, and even just being able to very quickly assess the long-term track quality benefits from having done a renewal type is at the push of a button. It's the query builder system within that tool, very powerful and used to best advantage. It would then, in future, actually allow you to do quite a lot of your ongoing assurance, so that you can match the deliverable with what you actually set out to achieve. So all that box ticking can be automated potentially within Insight. So some really interesting innovations, not necessarily silver bullet, big ticket things, but lots of little incremental things that, if we are able to scale on a national basis, add up to quite a lot.
Okay, so finally, you might ask, well, okay, safety, sustainability, health and well-being, what is that to do with affordability? But I'll just run through very quickly some of the things that we're looking at as a national team now. That one looks quite simple, but what we've ended up with, because we've gone our own way in renewals and because lots of people have an opinion, we've ended up with we chop down trees every week because there's lots of stuff in the paperwork that we think we need on site, but actually it's what people wanted in the paperwork, as opposed to taking another look and say, what do we really need? And what we really need is to reduce the amount of trees we're cutting down every week. It's a simple thing, but we're looking at it, and that's already work in progress. This one is one of my biggest bugbears, because somebody had an idea a long time ago that, you need to tell people when there's an RRV within 10 metres of you. Okay, I have a different view, because that has evolved into something now which is out of control. Some people use it, some people don't use it. Even in my alliance, I went to a site in London 2 weekends ago, they weren't using it. Yet there was a site a mile away with my alliance that were using it. So we've got to drive some consistency. We've got to help the machine providers because it's out of control. We've got to get some control of the market of proximity sensors. My starting point is actually we don't need it. And let's see where we go from there. And if I told you in the last 7 years, we've spent a couple of £1 million on using proximity sensors when probably at least 50% of the time, they don't even work when you get to site. My helmet doesn't buzz when I'm getting too close to an RRV. So what are we wasting our money on? There's a couple of £1 million we could have saved in the last 7 years. This one, I told you earlier on that we do probably nearly 100% of our welding using two human beings that were doing it that way when the railways existed 200 years ago, or started to exist 200 years ago. That picture is probably not from that far back, but that's kind of what our welders are doing now. So we need to get to, there is lots of mechanised kit out there. We know that already. We know that in Network Rail, we worked with a supplier and we spent £3 million developing induction welding, and then we stopped. That thing is revolutionary. If we can get that, if we can put some more energy back into that induction welding, particularly for S&C renewals, it'll reap its rewards. And the reason why I've put this in the safety and sustainability section is because think of the manual handling that those welders are doing every single night of the week when they're out there lifting heavy gas bottles, lifting trolleys, taking them up and down steps, which they probably shouldn't be doing. Think about how we could reduce that and also take the peak demand of welding away from the weekends. Because at weekends, we have Uncle Tom Cobley and all doing welding, and we're struggling. So we're just coming towards the end of the presentation, so we need to get there. And this one is the final one. Project Value Add is something I'm driving in North West and Central, which we will share with the community of practice eventually. If you think about it as project whilst we're there. Whilst we're there, those two pictures, whilst we were there, we did some vegetation clearance. It sounds simple, but think about maintenance defects. This is why I've put it in the safety section. Think about our maintenance colleagues who sometimes struggle to achieve all of their outputs with regards to removing defects out of track, whatever that defect may be. I could probably do that defect slightly more efficiently because I'm there anyway. And it will allow maintenance to go and do other defects. So it's not free, but it adds value and it actually gives us a safer railway. So this is something I'm really majoring on. And also, alongside that, is all of that wasted time when I only need a tamper for 2 hours on a follow-up tamp. What does it do for the other 6 hours? It goes and sits on a siding somewhere. It's not going to be doing that anymore because we can't afford all the tampers that we've got in the UK. So we need to utilise the time more better. So any free time I've got, I'm going to give it to maintenance and they can make use of it and do whatever they want with it. That will save millions over the next 3 years of this control period and CP8. So that's all from Eric and I. It's far from perfect. We've got so much to do. And I guess one of the reasons for coming here today, if you've got any ideas of things that we could look at nationally, like it happened this morning with Leventi coming and just talking to me about something, right, we'll take it on. So yeah, thanks for listening. We are in a crisis. We might not kind of climb our way fully out of the crisis, but we'll certainly do our best as a collective. So thank you.